I worked for a millionaire for 20 years, but he hid a secret from his own daughter. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel to keep hearing real stories and secrets few dare to tell. I should have never heard that. Swear to God I wasn't supposed to. But the office window was slightly open and he didn't see me come back to grab the pickup truck keys. I froze right there. Just a few words, but they chilled me to the bone, like someone had dumped a bucket of ice water down my back. Mr. Whitmore spoke softly, the way he always did when things got serious. He was on the phone, said the matter was closed, that no one had mentioned that name in this house for over 20 years, and that bringing it up now would help no one. I didn't know whether to climb the steps and knock or just turn around and pretend nothing happened, but it was too late. That sentence echoed in my head the whole day, not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't. That name he avoided, it was a ghost, one I buried too, out of loyalty, or maybe fear. That day when I picked up Lauren from college, she was different. She didn't smile when she got in the car, didn't say a word, just stared at her phone, lost in thought. I asked if she was okay and she just said, "Got a few things on my mind, Mr. Harris. Old stuff. Doesn't even make sense, but it's bothering me." I swallowed hard. That weight she felt, it felt tied to the same weight I'd buried long ago. My name is Harris, driver, confidant, and sometimes silent witness to things I wish I could forget. It's been 20 years since I started working for the Whitmore family. I came in young, not even 30, just to drive the company cars, just another chauffeur with no big ambitions. But over time I stuck around. Mr. Whitmore's trust in me grew, gave me the keys to the house, sent me with documents, had me pick up important people at the airport. I knew things even his wife didn't. I became something like a butler without the uniform. Their estate in Greenwich was its own world. Everything was uncomfortably quiet, not a thing out of place. No loud noises, no untimely conversations. Even Lauren's laugh when she was a kid seemed like a disturbance. Mr. Whitmore's current wife, Mrs. Margaret, was cold, gave orders like spreading butter on toast. No glance, no feeling. And the man himself was one of those who commanded respect without raising his voice. You felt it, in his posture, his stare, his silence. When Lauren was born, I was the one who drove her to the hospital, saw Mr. Whitmore carry her out in his arms, as serious as ever, and heard him tell the nurse, "This girl will never know a thing." At the time, I figured it was just some overprotective dad talk, but later, it haunted me. Lauren grew up without asking too many questions, polite, obedient, smart, and alone. Very alone. She had nannies, private tutors, and a family that seemed to avoid each other in the very halls of their own home. And I just kept going. I stayed. I became part of the background, like an old piece of furniture no one replaces, but that's always there. I witnessed whispered conversations, muffled arguments, phone calls abruptly ended the moment I walked in. I knew what I was supposed to hear and what I was supposed to forget, and I did forget, until that afternoon. That heavy summer afternoon when I heard that name coming from the office, a name that made my heart slam against my chest, a name that brought her back to me, her, Mr. Whitmore's first wife, Lauren's mother, or at least the woman everyone said was her mother, a woman who vanished from that house like she'd evaporated. No one talked about it, no one explained. I remember just one thing, the look in her eyes the day she disappeared, a look that still haunts me. But it was only now, after so many years, that everything seemed to begin resurfacing. Lauren, now an adult, had just returned to the States after finishing a postgrad program abroad. More independent, sharper, with that determined air of someone who doesn't accept vague answers. And it seemed like the time away had only strengthened her urge to understand what no one had ever told her. That day, while I was driving, I caught her watching me in the rearview mirror, like she was trying to read me. "Do you remember my mother?" she asked out of nowhere. I felt my soul leave my body, took a deep breath, faked surprise. "Of course I do." "Why?" "Because I don't. I don't have a single memory of her. Nothing. No image, no voice, no scent." I went silent, gripped the steering wheel, made up some excuse. "You were really little, you know. Sometimes our minds just erase things." She didn't reply, and her silence was louder than any accusation. When we reached the estate, she walked in without another word, and I just sat there in the car, sweating despite the air conditioning, with that name pounding in my head. The name Mr. Whitmore refused to say, the name I had promised to forget. The name that could change everything, if someone decided to remember. But it was only later that night that the real shock came. I was walking past the veranda, heading to park the car in the garage, when I heard a sound coming from the music room, a room that was rarely used. I approached carefully. The light was on, and inside, sitting alone at the piano, was Lauren, holding that old childhood music box in her hands, the one that had disappeared years ago, the one everyone said had been thrown out. She opened the lid, and a faint melody began to play. The same tune as always, but that wasn't what froze me. It was what was inside: a folded photo, a yellowed piece of paper, and a name handwritten in delicate script, Helena. And that's when everything stopped inside me, because that name, that was the name I had heard just hours earlier, coming from Mr. Whitmore's mouth over the phone. That sweltering summer afternoon, I overheard a name no one had spoken in that house for years, and my heart skipped a beat. She walked in quietly, with that look of someone who hears their own thoughts louder than any music. She'd been like that for days. Sometimes she'd laugh in the middle of a thought. Sometimes she'd suddenly go cold, like something had hit her square in the chest. And me, after driving so many people throughout my life, I'd learned that a passenger's silence often says more than any conversation. That morning, Lauren asked me to take her to an old bookstore downtown. Said she was looking for a rare book that reminded her of childhood. I didn't ask questions, just nodded and went to get the car. But deep down, I already sensed it wasn't nostalgia. It felt more like an investigation. On the way there, she didn't touch her phone once, just stared out the window, her chin resting in her hand, as if hoping the streets would give her answers. "You used to live in Sao Paulo before working with my dad, right?" she asked, breaking the silence out of nowhere. "I did, yeah," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "In Ipiranga. Worked in private transportation before I came here. And do you remember when my mum disappeared?" I swallowed the question along with the lump in my throat. The engine suddenly sounded louder inside the cabin. It caught me off guard. She didn't say died, didn't say passed away. She said disappeared, like someone who deep down feels she was left in the dark. "Lauren, you know it was a hard time. Your dad barely spoke about it. As an employee, I couldn't really get involved." She slowly turned her face to me, a calm look, but direct. One of those stares you can't dodge. "But did you see anything? Or did you just believe what you were told to believe?" I stopped at a red light and felt cold sweat run down my back, even with the air on full blast. It was like the car, so often a place to hide, was now putting me under a spotlight. "I saw what anyone would have seen, kid. A family trying to deal with a loss." She didn't say a word, looked straight ahead again, and that silence hurt more than a scream. We arrived at the bookstore, one of those really old ones, smelling of yellowed paper and aged wood. She stayed in there for hours, came out holding a book, looking thoughtful. On the ride back, the conversation drifted to other things, but that question lingered. 2 days later, she asked me to take her to her paternal grandmother's house, Mrs. Irene, who lived in a more distant neighborhood. The elderly woman, already struggling to walk, greeted us with that tight hug and lavender scent only grandmas seem to have. But what caught my attention was how much Lauren wanted to be alone with her. She asked me to wait outside in the car, so I stayed there, watching through the window, unable to hear a word. But judging by their gestures, it was a serious conversation. Mrs. Irene cried. Lauren hugged her, and in the end, the two of them sat holding hands for a long while, in silence. On the way back, she was even quieter, eyes fixed ahead, until she spoke, in a tone that felt more like a confession. "Grandma said my mother was different, that she smiled a lot, talked to the plants, loved cooking with us, but I don't remember any of that. I don't remember a scent, a voice, nothing, just an absence. Like my childhood was built on top of a hole. I felt a tightness in my chest I could barely hide. I wanted to pull the car over, step out and disappear, but I stayed steady at the wheel, pretending I hadn't heard. And what if they've been hiding things from me, Mr. Harris? What if the truth is worse than what they told me?" She looked at me again. This time her eyes were damp. "You don't have to tell me anything now, but think about it. Think if you were in my place. Growing up with a missing piece, with everyone acting like it's normal not to remember your own mother." From that day on, I realized Lauren wasn't going to stop. It was a thirst for answers that even time wouldn't quench. Every conversation with her left me more fragile, more exposed, like the walls I'd built inside me were starting to crack. By the end of that week, she asked me to take her to the old house where she'd spent the first years of her life. A 2-story home, locked up, which Mr. Whitmore had kept rented for years, but was now vacant. We used the spare key he'd given me long ago for emergencies. I never thought this would be one. We went in. The house smelled of stillness, dust, mildew, and memories no one visited anymore. Lauren climbed the stairs without saying a word. I followed from a distance. In the room that used to be hers, she found a box of old toys, armless dolls, coloring books, half-finished adventures of a forgotten childhood. But what caught her attention was a drawing, folded inside one of the books, a child's scribble showing a woman smiling beside a little girl. In the corner of the page, written in crooked letters, one word: Mommy. Lauren held that paper like someone clutching a clue in an old crime. She bowed her head, took a deep breath, and motioned for me to come over. "Do you think I made this up?" she asked, almost whispering. "Or do you think someone erased it from me?" I didn't know what to say. I just stared at that drawing and wished, really wished, that time could be rewound. On the ride back home, the silence in the car was deafening. I kept my eyes on the road, but my thoughts were adrift. When we reached the entrance of the estate, she still hadn't said a word since we left the house, but before getting out of the car, she stopped, looked me in the eye, and asked, "Mr. Harris, are you sure everything they told me is true?" That night, the wind made the tree branches tap against the kitchen window like impatient fingers. The mansion, vast and silent as always, seemed to breathe with me, but at a strange rhythm. I had just parked the car when I heard Lauren's footsteps upstairs, firm steps, determined, and far too quick for someone just heading to bed. I went up slowly, quietly, trying to understand what she was looking for. When I reached the top of the staircase, I saw the hallway light on. She was standing in front of that door, the room on the second floor that had always been locked, ever since I'd first stepped into that house 2 decades ago. No one ever talked about it. It was as if that room didn't even exist. Mrs. Margaret avoided walking past it. Mr. Whitmore had a near-ritual habit of locking the door and stashing the key in a place only he knew. And the few staff members who asked too many questions about that room didn't stay around for long. Lauren tried the handle, locked, as always, but what caught my attention was the metallic sound of the key turning from inside. It was different. Not the same old lock. It had been replaced. She looked at me. I had approached, silently. "Have you ever been in here?" she asked in the most direct tone I'd ever heard from her. I hesitated, took a breath, told her no. And technically it was true. I had never been inside, never even dared. "Do you know why it's locked?" That's your father's business, Lauren. Always has been. He never let anyone open that door." She crossed her arms and leaned against the wall, staring at the wood as if trying to see through it. Funny, this house is so big, and yet it feels like there are so many places I never really knew. She walked back downstairs without another word. But I knew that door had opened something else in her, a restlessness that wasn't going away anytime soon. The next day, while she was out, I went to Dr. Whitmore's office. The door was closed, as always. I knocked. He allowed me in. Inside, the air was heavy, full of books, meticulously organized papers, and that old leather scent. It was the only room in the house that seemed untouched by time. "Can I ask you something?" I began cautiously. "You can. Doesn't mean I'll answer," he replied without lifting his eyes from the documents. The upstairs door as the lock changed, he finally looked up, and in that moment, I felt the weight of someone who had been carrying secrets longer than he ever wanted to. Yes, I thought it was for the best. Some things should stay where they are, but Lauren saw it. "She's curious, sir. She's digging, and when she starts..." "I know how she is, Harris," he cut in firmly, "and that's exactly why I locked it." I fell silent. It wasn't my place to push, but I left with a knot in my stomach. I knew there was something in that room that needed to be faced, not hidden. That night, Lauren walked into the kitchen while I was having a cup of coffee before heading out. She sat across from me, holding a metal key in her hands. "I found this key at the back of the library desk drawer. I've never seen it before, but something tells me it opens that door." My heart began to race. "Lauren, maybe it's best not to mess with this. There are things that time erases," she cut in bitterly. "Time doesn't erase anything, Mr. Harris. It only hides. And I'm done pretending I don't notice. She went up the stairs before I could say anything else. I waited a few minutes, then followed, but when I reached the hallway, the door was closed, and this time, locked from the inside. I heard the latch move, called her name. No response. A few minutes later, she came out, face pale, eyes sunken, and didn't say a word. She walked past me like she was floating. That night dragged on. I kept replaying old memories in my head, trying to guess what she might have found in there. Photos, objects, a diary, the image of the past she'd been searching for. But it was only the next morning that the truth hit me. I went upstairs to tidy up, as I did from time to time, and as I passed that room, the door was slightly open. The forgotten room now looked different. It smelled of dust and lavender, the bed made with old linens, heavy curtains drawn across the windows, and right in the middle of the bedspread sat the old music box. The same one I was sure had vanished years ago. It was there, untouched, lid closed, as if someone had placed it with the utmost care. Next to it, a photograph face down. I stepped closer, slowly turned the lid of the music box. The melody began to play, a tune I recognized, but that felt like a whisper from another world. It had been so long. I picked up the photo, turned it over, and there she was, Helena, young, with a soft smile, holding baby Lauren in her arms, the same photo I'd seen only once in my life, a photo that officially had never existed. Time seemed to freeze in that moment. The next day, I found the door ajar again, and inside, the music box was on the bed, as if someone had left it there on purpose. Lauren came down the stairs holding the photo, her steps slow, like each step carried a piece of the childhood she never got to live. The silence of the house made the floorboards creak beneath her, and it sent a chill down my spine. I was in the living room, sitting on the same old couch, pretending to read a newspaper I couldn't even focus on. When she appeared in front of me, she didn't say a word. She just held out the photo, face down. I took it without saying anything, turned it over slowly, and when I saw what was on it, I felt time come to a halt. It was a faded photo printed on matte paper, edges worn, tiny cracks in the corners. It showed a woman smiling, sitting on a garden bench. In her arms, a baby just a few months old wrapped in a white blanket with blue polka dots. The woman wore a simple yet lovely dress, her brown hair tied back with a pale ribbon. Her expression, it was gentle, but there was something else I couldn't quite name. A trace of sadness, maybe, or longing, but I knew exactly who she was. It was Helena, the woman who once lived in that house as a wife, Lauren's mother, the woman who, according to the official story, died shortly after giving birth, and who, for convenience, had been swept from history like dust under a rug. "I found it inside the music box," Lauren said, her voice still calm, but her eyes sharp, scanning my face for a reaction I was trying hard to hide. I looked at the photo again. On the back, something was written by hand in delicate, slightly shaky script, but still legible. "She'll smile like her father, but her heart will be mine. Forgive me if one day I disappear." My throat tightened. The words tangled inside me. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, a mix of guilt and memory, because I recognized that handwriting. I had seen her notes before, back when everything was still whole. Helena's handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, but heavy with sorrow, like someone writing in a hurry not to be read. "Are you going to tell me who this woman is, or are you going to keep pretending you've never seen her before?" Lauren asked, staring straight at me. I hesitated to respond. My instinct was to stay quiet, as I always had, but in that moment something inside me cracked. I couldn't pretend anymore. I wasn't just a driver. I had carried that lie for far too long, and now she was in front of me, asking for a truth that was hers by right. "She's your mother, Lauren." She didn't show surprise. It was as if she already knew, only needed to hear it from my mouth to confirm what her heart had been screaming. "Dr. Whitmore's first wife. Her name was Helena," I continued, "and the woman in that photo is her. I remember the day that picture was taken. It was a Sunday. The garden was in bloom. She asked me to capture the moment. I took it with one of those disposable cameras she'd bought from a newsstand. Then why has no one ever shown me this?" she asked, more to herself than to me. "Why hide a photo, a memory, a sentence?" I lowered my eyes. I didn't know how to explain that sometimes silence is crueler than forgetting. What happened to her, Mr. Harris? That was the question I had feared for 20 years, and there it was, bare, sharp, piercing, straight through my chest, demanding an answer I wasn't ready to give. They told me she... She died after I was born. That there were complications, Lauren continued, her voice cracking. But now I don't know what to believe anymore. I tried to take a deep breath, to buy time, but she stepped ahead of me. I don't remember a scent or a touch or being held, but when I looked at this photo, something inside me recognized her, as if her body remembered what her mind had forgotten. She sat on the couch beside me, the photo resting on her lap. She stared at the image, as if trying to extract from it all the answers I didn't have the courage to give. I remember my grandma once mentioned that my mother liked lavender, said she used to dab oil behind her ears before bed. She gave a faint smile. And yesterday, when I opened that door, that was exactly the smell. Lavender. After all these years, how is that possible? I closed my eyes. This was beyond my control now. Her memories were returning in fragments through the cracks, like wind slipping through shattered glass, and nothing I said would stop the truth from surfacing. That music box. She used to give it to me when I cried. I don't remember her face, but I remember the song. And I remember a warm embrace, a floral dress, and a soft laugh that came with the melody. I looked at Lauren, my heart aching in a way that barely fit inside me. I knew it was real. I knew those memories weren't made up. They had only been asleep, smothered by years of silence and half-truths. She turned to me, eyes glassy but steady. "There's something really wrong in this house, Mr. Harris, and I'm going to find out what it is." I nodded in silence. She didn't need my permission. She only needed the truth. We stayed there for a while, saying nothing, just listening to the soft ticking of the old wall clock, like time had started counting again after standing still for years. When she stood up, she held the photo carefully, folded the note and placed it back inside the music box. Then she looked at me and spoke in a low voice, full of meaning. "Some things, Mr. Harris, time just couldn't manage to hide, huh? I could have sworn time would make me forget, that certain images kept locked away long enough would simply fade from memory on their own. But that's not what happened. The more time passed, the more they stuck. And now, with Lauren digging deep, those memories were flooding back with a force that robs me of sleep. I fooled myself into thinking I was just another employee, that I could walk through this house, hear what I heard, see what I saw, and go on living as if I were invisible. But the truth is, some things you only see once and carry with you forever. Back then, Helena was already acting strange. There were days she wouldn't speak at all. Others, she'd cry without reason. Then suddenly she'd appear laughing, singing with Lauren in her arms as if nothing had happened. I didn't understand it fully, but it wasn't my place to. Not back then. My job was to drive, clean the car, pick up medicine, deliver messages. But the eyes see more than the mouth ever confesses, and the heart understands long before reason accepts. I remember the day like it was yesterday. Lauren was still a baby. Must have been about 6 or 7 months old. The sky was overcast, and the air in the house was heavy. Mrs. Helena was in her room, lying on her side, staring at the wall. The nanny had left early that day, and I was in the kitchen waiting for Dr. Whitmore. He was supposed to head out for a meeting. When he came down the stairs, he wasn't wearing a suit, he wasn't carrying his briefcase. He looked serious, quiet. He picked up the phone, made a quick call, and said just a few words. "She's unstable. It's today. Unstable." That's the word he used. Not sad, not in need of help. Unstable. Later that afternoon, around 4, 2 men arrived in a dark car with no front plate. They weren't doctors. They wore white, but there were no names on their badges. One of them carried a small case. The other stayed silent the whole time. Helena was in the garden, sitting on an iron chair, holding Lauren, who was asleep in her arms. When the men approached, she seemed to sense it. She stood up slowly, looked at Dr. Whitmore and said in a steady voice, "You promised you wouldn't do this." He didn't answer. He just reached out to take the baby. Helena hesitated, but handed her over. I was there, frozen, my body shaking. I wanted to do something, anything, but I didn't know what. She started backing away. Her voice trembled. "I'm not going with them. I'm just tired. I just need to sleep. Give me more time." One of the men pulled something from the case, a syringe. The other took her arm. Firmly but not violently. She screamed her daughter's name, and in that moment when she looked at me, it was like she was begging, "Help me." But I didn't move. The injection worked fast. Her legs gave out. They caught her by the arms and placed her in the car. Dr. Whitmore stood holding Lauren, looking off into the distance, as if he'd already forgotten what had just happened. From that day forward, no one ever spoke her name again inside that house. The official story was told to the family, to friends, and eventually to Lauren herself. Postpartum complications, a sudden infection, a rapid decline, death within 24 hours. Simple, clean, convenient. The death certificate was signed by a doctor affiliated with the family's hospital. The funeral was private. No body. They said she wanted to be cremated. No one questioned it. And me, I stayed silent. Not out of malice, but out of fear. Fear of losing my job. Fear of confronting Dr. Whitmore. Fear of touching a wound that might bleed all over me. I became an accomplice to an erasure, a witness to a woman being torn from her own story. Over time, I started doubting what I had seen. It was easier to believe the lie. I told myself maybe the doctor had been right. Maybe she really was too sick. Maybe that episode had been dangerous. But nothing could justify the way it was done. No conversation, no support, no kindness. Helena wasn't treated like a wife. She was treated like a problem. Years passed and Lauren grew up inside a bubble of silence. Every time she asked questions, the subject changed. And I smiled without showing my teeth, looked away, said I didn't remember much. But now there's no hiding it anymore. That photo, that note, that music box. It's as if the past is pounding on the door, demanding to be heard. And I'm too old to keep pretending I didn't see what I saw. I remember the last time Helena looked me in the eyes. Her pain cut through me like a hot knife. And even now, after all this time, the weight of that look still follows me through the halls of this house. Like she's here, watching, waiting for someone to have the courage to say what really happened. I'm no hero, just a weak man. An employee who obeyed too much, who traded his conscience for comfort. But I know, I saw, I was there. And I've kept it inside for 2 decades. But now the weight is so heavy that even the sound of my own footsteps feels false. I knew something was wrong the moment I saw Lauren's car missing from the garage. It was Saturday, late afternoon, and she almost never went out alone without telling me. She'd usually call, even if it was just for a quick trip to the flower shop or the cafe down the block. But that afternoon, she vanished without a word. I waited, tried calling. No answer. And I started to feel that familiar tightness in my chest, the same one I get when I can sense the past creeping back up. And it was. I just didn't know how yet. About an hour later, I got a short message. I'll be back later, don't worry. But I worried. As I walked around the house trying to distract myself, I ended up in the library. And that's where I saw it. On the desk, an open folder with some of Dr. Whitmore's papers, old documents, scribbled with handwritten notes. Among them, a folded yellowed paper with the letterhead of a psychiatric clinic, address in Atibaya, stamped from 1999. And there, between technical terms and medical jargon, was her name, Helena Rocha Montero. My stomach turned. That folder should have been locked away tight, but there it was, wide open on the desk, a clear sign Lauren had been there. I thought about calling, warning the doctor, doing something, but I couldn't. I sat down in the library chair and stared at the paper, as if willing it to rewind time and undo everything that had been done. Lauren returned later that evening, came through the front door without a sound. Even though I didn't want to, I went to the hall like I had to see her with my own eyes. She was different, not tired, not angry. She was calm, but in a bitter way, like someone who had just received a confirmation they never wanted. She didn't say goodnight, didn't take off her coat. She just looked at me, straight through me, and said, "I saw her, Mr. Harris." My heart leapt. I wanted to ask what she saw, how, what happened, but I was speechless. They didn't tell me her name. They only told me she was a long-term patient, living there for over 20 years, stable but with no visitors. Her voice was calm, almost cold. I made up a simple excuse, said I was a researcher. The receptionist didn't question it. They let me walk through the garden. It was beautiful, too peaceful even, a silence that felt wrong. She took a few steps like she was reliving the moment. And that's where, in one of the inner verandas, I saw her sitting. Grey hair, pale skin, but the eyes were exactly like mine. Or maybe mine are like hers, I don't know. I couldn't look away. It was like listening to a story whose ending I already knew, but still needing to hear every word, every pause. She looked at me, and I looked back. Neither of us said a word. But right then, in that second, something happened. A recognition, a pain, a kind of longing that has no explanation. Lauren lowered her head. Her hands trembled slightly. I didn't hug her, didn't say my name. I just stood there, watching, trying to understand what had been taken from us. I said nothing. Her silence was an accusation, but there was nothing I could say in my defense. Anything I offered now would be too little, too late, cowardly, she went on. In her room there was a vase with lavender, dry, a few fallen leaves, and a music box, identical to the one I found here in the house, closed, untouched, like she'd been holding onto it all these years, waiting for someone who never came. Lauren leaned against the wall, her eyes red but dry. And I just kept thinking, did she recognize me? Did she wait all this time? Did she think I'd show up one day? And if she did, why didn't anyone let me? That question echoed through the hallway like a muffled scream. I spent 23 years thinking my mother had died. 23 years living with a hole no one would explain. Everyone pretended it was normal. Everyone agreed to the silence. And now I find out she was alive, just a few miles away, and that you all knew. Her voice broke on that last line. The pain spilled out through her eyes. Why didn't anyone tell me, Armando? I tried to speak, but nothing came out. Everything I knew, everything I kept, everything I could have said to explain. Now it all felt useless, as if any justification would just be another layer over the original lie. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, took a deep breath, and tucked her hair behind her ear. You don't have to explain anything else, Armando. I just wish someone had told me sooner. The clinking of dishes in the kitchen sink sounded distant. I was there, washing glass after glass, just to drown out the silence coming from the living room. I knew it was coming. It had been in the air since the day Lauren came back from that clinic. It was only a matter of time. And time arrived on a grey Monday morning. Dr. Whitmore was sitting in his leather armchair, reading the newspaper like he always did. He looked calm, but there was something off in his stillness. That posture of a man who believes he's in control, who thinks no one dares to challenge him. Lauren walked in with purpose. She didn't ask permission, didn't announce herself. She marched toward him with the steps of someone who has something serious to say. In her hands she carried her mother's photo, the note from the music box, and a copy of the clinic's documents. I froze in the kitchen doorway. Wanted to step away, give them space, but I couldn't. My body stayed there, frozen, as if it needed to hear every word. We need to talk, she said bluntly. Dr. Whitmore slowly lowered the newspaper, looked over his glasses, and asked, Now? Now, she replied firmly. He sighed, crossed his legs, and waved a hand like saying, Go on then. Lauren pulled the papers from her bag and dropped them on the coffee table. The dry thud of the documents hitting the surface was like a gunshot in that quiet room. This is about my mother, or better yet, about the lie you've told your whole life. Dr. Whitmore frowned, tried to keep his composure. What are you talking about, Lauren? Don't pretend you don't know. I went there. I saw her. The clinic in Atibaya, the patient who's been there over 20 years, the same name from the birth certificate you tucked away in a drawer, Helena Rocha Montero, my mother. The woman you said was dead. His lips tightened. His face stayed firm, but his fingers trembled. Lauren noticed. Why, Dad? Why? He stood up slowly, looked out the window like he was searching for an escape on the horizon, but there wasn't one. Not this time. Your mother, he began, voice lower than usual. She had problems. She had episodes. She put you at risk. I did what I thought was right. Put me at risk, Lauren shot back, voice rising. I was a baby. You had no right to separate us like that. There were other ways. You could have gotten help. You could have told me with time, but no. You chose to erase her, like she was a mistake, like she didn't matter. I was trying to protect you, he said, louder now. You don't understand, Lauren. She had a severe breakdown. She tried to leave the house with you in her arms, with no destination. She was unraveling. You could have died that day. But I didn't, she yelled. And do you know why? Because she loved me. Because even in the middle of her despair, she never abandoned me. Unlike you. You locked her away in some forgotten place like she was a burden. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, faced his daughter like he was seeing the woman he once swore to forget. I regretted it, he said, voice cracking. But by then it was too late. I moved on. I rewrote the story. I thought it would be better for you. That silence would be less cruel than the truth. Then why didn't you ever tell me? Not when I got older, not when I started asking questions. Why keep lying? Because I was afraid of losing you, he whispered. Lauren stopped. Anger gave way to a kind of sadness that seemed deeper, as if that answer was worse than she'd ever imagined. You lost me a long time ago, you just didn't notice. She turned and walked upstairs. I heard her door close minutes later. Dr. Whitmore stood still, staring into nothing. The newspaper still rested on his lap, but now it shook along with his hands. He saw me in the doorway. I hadn't moved, I hadn't spoken. How long have you known? He asked. I lowered my eyes, couldn't answer right away. Since the beginning. He nodded slowly, like he'd expected it, but it still hurt. Leave, Harris. Doctor, I said, leave. Today. You can settle everything with Margaret at the office. I stood there for a few seconds. Then I nodded. There was no argument, no protest. I had been waiting for this, and deep down, I felt a strange kind of relief, one I hadn't known I needed. The next morning, I went to the servants' quarters to pack my things. Folded shirts, polished shoes, the small radio I listened to at night. Everything I owned fit into a medium-sized suitcase. Nothing took up too much space, not even me, all those years, and it was like I'd left no trace at all. But when I opened the last drawer of the dresser, I found something I hadn't expected. An old envelope, my name written on the front. The handwriting was small, feminine, familiar. I opened it gently. Inside was a letter, short, written in blue ink on plain paper, folded in 4. At the bottom, a signature, Helena. Mornings are quieter now. The alarm still rings at the same time, though I don't need it anymore. Habit. I get up, make my coffee the old way, spread butter on my toast, and sit on the porch of my modest house, where the street is almost always still. The sound of cars doesn't bother me now. After years of orders, horns, and hurried footsteps echoing over cold marble floors, now I hear time. Yes, it has a sound, and it feels like it's finally decided to speak to me. I have no boss, no routine, and most importantly, no more excuses to run from what I've carried inside me for so long. Helena's letter is still with me. I keep it like a sacred confession. She didn't write much, but she said everything. Just 3 lines on that page. Armando, if one day my daughter comes looking for you, please tell her the truth. She deserves it, even if it hurts. The date in the corner was nearly a month before the day she was taken. It broke me. She knew the silence would stretch across years, knew the weight would fall on me too. And even so, she asked gently, not as a demand, but as a plea. And I failed, out of fear, out of loyalty, out of clinging to a foundation that, in the end, was never mine. Lauren moved to a small apartment close to the clinic. She said she wanted to stay near. She didn't ask anyone for help, didn't consult her father, didn't look back. She took only what was necessary, a few clothes, her books, the photos she managed to recover, and of course the music box. That one. They say she lets it play every day, softly, while she cooks dinner or organizes her work papers. She doesn't talk much with me. The conversations are short, to the point. But her eyes, they don't accuse anymore, they don't judge. It's as if they understand, as if they've come to accept that sometimes love hides inside fear. And while that's not an excuse, it isn't cruelty either. Every week, without fail, she visits the clinic. She brings flowers, reads passages from a new book aloud, carefully brushes her mother's hair. Sometimes she just sits beside her on the garden bench, without saying a word. Helena doesn't talk much, but she listens. With her eyes, with her body. A hand gesture, a deeper breath, a tear held back. They are rebuilding something they never had, as if they were 2 women who met too late, and chose to love anyway. Dr. Whitmore, they say, rarely leaves his room now. He had the guest wing of the house closed off, let go of half the staff, and stopped attending the Foundation's events. He aged all at once, as if the truth had ripped out a piece of him he'd forgotten was there. I haven't had direct contact with him since. The last time I saw him, it was from a distance, at the mansion's front gate. He was sitting in the garden, staring into nothing. A man who built empires, surrounded by walls, but who never knew what to do when the wall collapsed from the inside. Sometimes I think he carries the pain too, but it's not the same. Mine was the pain of someone who knew and said nothing. His is the pain of someone who chose to forget and was forced to remember. He chose to erase Helena from his daughter's life, but in the end it was Helena who returned, without needing to say a single word. And that's what broke him. Now retired, I spend my days reading, scribbling in an old notebook, watching the hours pass like there's something new. Sometimes I write letters I never send. Other times I remember the mornings I drove Lauren to school, her backpack bigger than she was, laughing in the back seat. Or the times Helena sat in the front, tired but still smiling, asking me how my family was. Those are memories that don't age. They were stored deep in the mind, waiting for the right moment to breathe. And now, they breathe. I don't know if I was loyal. Sometimes I think I was. Other times I fear I was only obedient, that I mistook loyalty for submission, that the fear of upsetting someone powerful made me forget to care for someone who truly needed it. Some nights I still dream about that afternoon in the garden. Helena holding her daughter, asking for more time, more patience, and me standing there, silent, hands in my pockets. I wake up drenched in sweat, with the taste of guilt in my mouth. But lately, that taste has started to fade, because I know that, even if late, the truth came out. And not because of my courage, but because of the strength of a daughter who refused to accept silence as an answer. Life taught me in the hardest way that hiding pain never heals it, it only delays it, and that the truth, no matter how heavy, is the only way to close a cycle, not to forget, but to move on. Some truths we hide, thinking we're protecting someone, but all we're doing is postponing the pain. I still don't know if I was loyal or just a coward. And you, what would you have done in my place? If this story moved you, leave a comment and tell us what country you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Leave a like and subscribe to keep hearing real stories and secrets from the elite. Click the story on your screen. It might reveal more than you think.